I really look forward to doing this. This has been a long time in the making. So
Thank you for being
thank
so
you,
patient.
thank you for George joining me here from Oldhammer and Tongs, the YouTube channel. So anybody who hasn't heard about it, please go and check it out. I really urge you to do it because it's a wonderful channel that I love, and it talks all about Oldhammer, especially about the old squats and orcs that you love so much, George. So thanks
Mm.
very much for coming on, mate.
Thanks so much, Josh. And thank you for your patience as we pulled it all together. But here we are. And this is White Dwarf 111, which I think was from 1989. And I must confess, it wasn't actually my first White Dwarf, but it was one that has made such a big impact on me. I thought it would be good to talk about. I actually bought it in 1994 on a family holiday to Suffolk, which is in the east of England. And we went to Ipswich, the sort of big city in the area. And in a secondhand bookshop, they had a small pile of secondhand white dwarfs, all of which I bought with my pocket money. I think they were about 50p or a pound each. And I got White Dwarf 50 and some of the early hundreds and this one, White Dwarf 111. And as I was going through those pages, I was very much into Games Workshop at the time. And of course, 1994, second edition 40k had just come out. That was my big game. And as I was going through this White Dwarf, I thought, this is actually my era. This is the Games Workshop era that really speaks to me and that I really love. And it's when I got back into the hobby in sort of 2019, 2020, I really felt that connection with my 11-year-old self in 1994 as someone who just loved that 80s, early 90s Games Workshop aesthetic, which is perfectly captured in this White Dwarf. And also, of course, it was essentially the codex that the squats got. This is as close to a codex as Games Workshop ever did for them. And there they are up front with this brilliant David Gallagher artwork. This is the artwork from the box set. So when you bought a box of 36 squats that you could build yourself in the similar style of the Imperial Guard or the Space Marines or the Orcs that they did at the time, this was the picture on the front. And I just think it's brilliant. It's classic David Gallagher, really captures what you can actually do with the models in the box, which he was always really good at, but also just gives you so many ideas and so much inspiration. I bloody love it. And here we go. There is that box set. So there's David Gallagher's artwork, and that's what you got in it. And you know, we all talk so much about how brilliant those box sets were because they were. I think it cost about $9.99. You got 36 fully posable models in it, and you could just sort of get super creative with them. It was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And it's still knocking about somewhere in mum and dad's loft. So at some point I'll go up there and bring them all down and paint them up. Because they are really things of beauty. And then we've got down at the bottom right, we've got a list of some of the contributors. And what I think is particularly glorious here is that we've got Brian Ansell, because Brian Ansell used to do quite a lot of writing, particularly of lore. And I've just always been a massive fan of the stuff that he came up with. I love the Orc books. Later on here, he's going to talk about the squats. Of course, Chaos. He was so involved in the realm of Chaos books. So it's always a joy when you see that cheeky little face, which I think is from the classic army pose that he did, looking out at you from the front cover, because you know it's going to be a good one. Here we go. And so this is the culture shock section, which they had, which would be a sort of rundown of stuff that's happening and going to happen. And it's just got a fabulous mix. So they introduced new members of staff. So you've got some new painters here who would join the team. You've got Rich Hodkinson and Ivan Bartlett. Then they talk about War Game Society campaigns, and then they'll talk about the fact they're about to release the Predator. So this is the first time the Predator tank was released. So it's just a kind of brilliant hobby sum up, and is one of those things I love about old White Dwarfs, because they've sort of got a little bit of everything in them. They talk about gaming societies, and they talk about new tanks and painters and writers and sculptors, and you really get a sense of that sort of world of Games Workshop, not simply being the products they put on the shelf, but there being so much more behind it. And I now, when I was younger, I didn't really read this stuff, but now I love going through and reading all of these little details and imagining all the people involved. And then on the other page, we've got Rip Priestley wearing a bolt thrower t-shirt, no less. So he's really obviously a metalhead at heart, with Nigel Stillman. So here we've got some of the products that you could order via mail order, the early days of mail order. So there's the Space Dwarfs at $9.99. The Imperial Guard box set down in the bottom left. That was the first box set. It was the first Games Workshop thing I ever bought. And it's absolutely amazing. And then we've got some others on the other side. So we've got, of course, the classic combat cards. I actually got a bunch of those on my gap year when I was about 18, 19. We found a random hobby shop in Bangkok in Thailand that had loads of combat cards. So we bought loads of them and played them throughout our travels. And they are really amazing. And then Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I love now going through all of that, even though I'm not really a player, just going through all the narrative is glorious. So here we are, all these things that you used to be able to get, captured in 2 pages. And so this is Critical Mass, which is where usually David Pringle would write reviews of fantasy fiction. He's brilliant. He's very witty. He comes across as the sort of slightly grouchy classic book reviewer who's sort of, puffing on a cigarette and drinking a strong coffee. But his reviews are actually fantastic. And as an aspiring fantasy author myself, going through this again now, I just find fascinating. I've got loads of tips about some of the brilliant fantasy writing that was coming out in the 80s from reading this section in Old White Dwarf. So it's been a real inspiration for me. When I first got this as a kid, I never read this section, but now I go back to it and I love it. It's awesome. And then right opposite that, you've got these brilliant war dancers. I'm not actually a massive elf guy myself, but sometimes when you look at the painting, it's hard not to love them. The colors are just absolutely sensational. Look at those green mohawks and red and orange mohawks and everything in between. And the sculpts themselves are utterly glorious. So yeah, these are really, really good ones. And what a great thing to have opposite your book reviews. So here we go. This is a follow-on, I think, to White Dwarf 109 and 110, which had really big Imperial Guard features, sort of like the first Imperial Guard Codex. And I was an Imperial Guard collector in my youth. So for me, this was the main section of this White Dwarf that I was really into initially. And it's got a big section on Rough Riders, but they really go into a lot of detail. So they give you a sort of overview about where they come from. Then they talk in depth about training. They've got a little narrative story at the bottom. A good quote there from Draven Gratz. And of course, these brilliant illustrations, which really bring these mounted Imperial Guardsmen to life. And there we have the Mark Copplestone figures. So these miniatures are just absolute classics. You need a significant lottery win to be able to get any of them from eBay these days, but they're just absolutely brilliant. They're essentially like his foot soldiers, but mounted, and they suit it perfectly. That standard bearer, oh my god, I've not got him, and I would just absolutely, give my left hand for him. Right. So yeah, more details on customs and rituals. This is the sort of gloriousness that you got from Games Workshop in the late 80s, and part of what made it so much fun. Now here, the White Shields. So I don't think I've ever really read about White Shields anywhere else before or since. But it was this concept of Imperial Guardsmen who had yet to sort of earn their stripes. So they were White Shields. And it was only once they sort of survived a battle that they actually got to wear Imperial insignia. And it's just such a brilliant concept of, poor old Imperial Guard are the sort of cannon fodder of the Imperium. And then you've got some who are even more cannon fodder than the others. And that's the White Shields at the very bottom of the pile. And here they are. So when I was a kid, did paint up some White Shields in a sort of very haphazard way, but I've been thinking about how it would be possible to do them now. Even maybe using a sort of a Necromunda gang or something like that as the guardsmen who haven't been given proper uniforms yet, but get sent into battle and then they can earn them. And it's a brilliant concept. And you've got all the detail here. You've got the background, you've got rites of passage, how they have to earn their insignia, and then of course some more stories, which is the sort of thing I love. And there we go. So that's the stats for your White Shield squad. Not hugely expensive, quite right too, because they're not likely to last too long, and not remarkable stats. But my God, I'd love to have a few squads of them, just sort of young heroes trying to prove themselves, ready for the next battle. And then over the other page, we've got those Mark Copplestone figures in lead. So you used to get these brilliant sort of pictures of what the models actually looked like before painting. So you get a sense of what those Rough Riders were like. And again, they're just brilliant. And also, cheekily, midway down, you can see a jet bike and a motorbike, and they're just absolutely awesome. I might have those tucked away in Mum and Dad's loft somewhere, but again, you'd need a pretty penny to be able to afford those now on eBay. But they are brilliant and mark that sort of golden era of Road Trader Imperial Guard. So here we are. Before we get to the squats, we've got the great Demon of Nurgle. Absolutely brilliant. Look at those graceful and clean ones. There's so much variation to those sort of absolutely disgusting models with all the belly options that you have. I think my personal favorite is probably the one with the teeth and the mouth. But of course, these are some of the absolute classic models, and the paint jobs that you see on these are glorious. It's a really good chance to use your bilious green and your titillating pink and all of that sort of thing. So it's wonderful to see those models here and to realize there was so much variety to them. I always sort of thought there was just one, but actually there were at least five, and you could really mix it up. But that leads us neatly into the squats feature. So this is basically the first codex that the squats got, and turned out it was the last one, until they got sort of re-released a year or two ago. I've never quite managed to forgive Games Workshop for ditching the squats in the way they did, because they were just fantastic, and they had so much potential for going into second edition and beyond with all the stuff they had in Epic. And you see some of the sort of Saxon style models that they were testing out for second edition and never really saw the light of day. So I've always been slightly bitter that they never got further, but in the meantime, they did put out enough fantastic miniatures for us to enjoy. And this feature where there's Brian Ansell, as we mentioned earlier, getting his writing on with Nigel Stillman and Graham Davis, and it's just a total deep dive into everything you could ever want to know about squats. Gives the background to the home worlds, about how they got isolated during the Age of Isolation, and then about how they turned into the sort of brilliant army that we know and love. And there's so much fabulous detail to enjoy in this section. So here we've got the history of the squats. So when I first entered the Old World Army Challenge in 2023 and painted up squats, and this was just constantly on my desk. I read it through it so many times. Of course, I couldn't resist but come up with a sort of unnecessary narrative background to my squats, who came from the stronghold of Grimshaft, where they'd been lost in the Age of Isolation. And it was all based on this history of the squats, which is just glorious narrative. And it adds so much wonderful detail to your armies. And then the illustrations as well are fabulous. I love those Hearthguard up in the top right. Looks like he's finishing off against the Eldar. There you go. So one of them's finishing him off. And then their old enemy, the Orcs, down in the bottom left, where Orcs and Dwarf bloody hate each other, as we know, and that's no different in the 41st millennium. So yeah, it's really coming alive with the pictures as well as the wonderful writing. So here we get an even deeper dive. So we read about the squats' relationship with the Imperium, how there's a sort of, they serve the Imperium but get an amount of autonomy in exchange for that. Then we hear about chaos squats and squat physiology, their society structure, and then about how the strongholds work. And I just get completely lost in this. I think it's great. You can really bury yourself in all of the detail and get your imagination whirring as you're thinking about your own squats, and how they are sort of represented and how they work in the universe. And then there's that brilliant picture of the warlord with his living ancestor. I do love a good living ancestor. But that really gives you a sense of their hierarchy. It's so dwarven and so Saxon, despite being tens of thousands of years in the future. It's just perfect. And so here we've got, again, it's really the illustrations that I absolutely love on this page. Down there, we've got a squat working on a Titan, and then some squats alongside Imperial Guard, in that sort of cityscape. I always hate to see a squat going down, but anyway, one of them's copped it. But it's brilliant to see them working alongside the Imperial Guard like that. And that's definitely something I sort of envisage in my future once I painted up some of those Road Trader Imperial Guard, as having them serving alongside the squats of Grimshaft, inspired by that picture. I love it. And here it is in all its glory. That is David Gallagher's artwork, which appeared on the front cover of This White Dwarf and on the box set for the 40k Space Dwarfs and for the Epic Squats. And it's just brilliant. It gives you quite a lot more detail about the picture, about the particular battle and the unit and the color scheme. I love this color scheme. That's why I stole it for my own painting. But I love the yellow piping on the green and then the red flak armor. But also it's very effective because it gives you a sort of sense of what's possible with the squats, because you've got the plastic box set up front, then you've got the exo armor in the background, and you've got bikes in the background, so you get a sort of sense of some of the scale of what's available with them, and it's just brilliant. I love that sense of them charging forwards, with the officer pointing, and all of those brilliant colors with the individuality shown in the helmets, so that they've got the uniform, but they're still dwarfs. They're still individuals, and that's all there to see. Mm. And so here we've got more detail about how it actually works gaming with them. So we've had all these pages so far that have basically just given you background and lore. And now you start to actually look at how it will work, playing with the dwarf army. So you've got your leaders, your HQ, which will be your warlord and their Hearth Guard. And then the breakdown of the Brotherhood, which is basically like the bulk of the army, and then the Engineers Guild to keep all of the vehicles running, because squats love vehicles. And some more illustrations to go with that. So here we've got them all in rhinos. Rhinos were sort of the go-to for all of the Imperial forces at the time. Here we go. We've got more details, including some exo armor at the bottom. He's just done away with that pesky orc. And then here we've got these banners. So the idea here was that you could actually go away and sort of photocopy those. And there is a flap in the box set. So when you open the box, if you sort of unfolded the sides, it had all these banners in it, so you could go and photocopy them and use them yourself. And they've got that dwarfish sense. They've got miners, and they've got dwarves slaying dragons, and dwarves looking dwarfy. And then they've got the bikers, and there's sort of the heraldry up top. It's a wonderful mix of all the things that you got with Space Dwarves, because there's that sort of more imperial look with the guys with the flak armor and everything, but then you had the bikers, who just look like they're off on their Harley Davidson running riot, and you had so much variety. You could really do what you wanted with them, so it's wonderful to see all of those banners, and there's absolutely no way I could ever hope to paint any of those. Although I say that, I've just had a wonderful couple of workshops with you, Josh, about painting banners. So maybe I should give myself some more credit. And at one point I'll try to do one of these myself, but they are super duper cool. I'd love to see some of those over a squat army at some point. And now we get into the nitty gritty. So they've got that brilliant sort of skid turn template down there for your bikes when they skid, and all of the stats. And you're beginning to see how your army list will come together, and all of your points. And they go into a lot more detail about that over the next few pages. But it's really helpful to see that sort of template of a Brotherhood army and how that would work points wise. You can see the squats were actually quite expensive, but well worth it because they were little badasses. So unlike Imperial Guard that were complete cannon fodder, these fellas could stand up to a bit more. So with the squats carrying on, we've got the concept of traces and chaos squats. So chaos, of course, gets everywhere. Not even the squats are safe from it. So there we've got some non-chaos squats dishing out some imperial justice with a commissar watching on in the background. But chaos squats are super cool, and there's quite a few people on the Discord community who are into chaos squats, and I don't blame them, because it's just really fun having that added aspect. And then slightly randomly on the other side, we've got this incredible diorama of Imperial Guard. And this basically shows all of the Imperial Guard miniatures that were available at the time. And it's just absolutely brilliant. You've got the command section up on the hill. You've got the Rough Riders up front. Then you've got loads and loads of guardsmen. That's largely made up of the plastic box set, but mingled in, you've got beastmen and rattling snipers and all sorts, with some wonderful lore about the regiment who are pictured in it. And it's just a great thing to have there. Right in the middle of the squat section, you've got this brilliant Imperial Guard army. And again, it's just so inspiring. All I wanted to do when I first saw this was to go away and paint tons of Imperial Guard. So I just went and sort of coated them in thick layers of enamel paint. But happy days. But yeah, it's glorious. And one of the aspects of the slight randomness of these old white dwarfs that I really enjoy is that suddenly something pops up like that. And as a kid or even as a grown up, you spend hours looking at all the details on it. So here we go. Here's all the dirty detail on those squats. So you've got the breakdowns of warlords and hearthguards. They released some fabulous miniatures for these, particularly for the hearthguard. I always thought I loved them. And there's some companies out there doing it now, putting out some really wonderful proxies if you don't fancy bankrupting yourself on eBay. So it's well worth having a look-see to see what's out there. Wereweevil, actually, they do wonderful Hearthguard. So yeah, do give them a look, because I think they really match that concept that you see on the far left there. And then we've got the combat squads, and then also we've got the heavy weapons. So this is super fun because this is squats, of course, love big weapons that go bang, and basically they could almost have as many as they wanted to if you could afford them. But mole mortars and thud guns were the famous ones at the time. If you were lucky enough to have got that early set that had a Space Marine land speeder, and I think it had a mole mortar in it, and possibly an Imperial Guard thud gun. It just had all of them. But yeah, and then below you've got the banners that you can go away and photocopy and paint in. So that's a big bonus. And so this is sort of the conclusion of the squats codex, I think. So you've got your guild masters and your guild weapons team. So again, that sort of captures that sense of those bikers with their long coats and their shaved heads or their bandanas, which again added so much variety to squats. It was slightly less my thing. I think I'm more of an Imperial squat guy, but I love the fact that some people just like the bikers and would have sort of armies of the bikers. And then opposite that, we've got this advert for these wonderful Adaptus Mechanicus. There's some of the absolute classic minis at the top there that really sort of define that rogue trader aesthetic, with the sort of ragged cloaks and the sort of sense of them all being slightly mutated and bionic. And then those first rattling snipers in the middle, bless them. And then the Imperial Guard jet bike, which is just so cool. I bloody love it. God, I was wrong. There's more squat in the codex. It just keeps going. It's the gift that keeps giving.
It is.
It really is lots of detail. But yeah, again, you could very easily put together an absolutely enormous army of all of this, with the living ancestors who are kind of like psychers for the squats. Throw in some cheeky commissars, looks like it's quite an interesting looking commissar there. Tech priests, and then there are your bikes. So there's your bikers, all just looking like they're sort of shooting around the Midwest on their Harley Davidsons. And so there we've got the squat minis as they came. Again, look at those Hearthguard. Oh, they're so wonderful. And I love the living ancestors. What a cool concept. And then down below we've got the Exo armor, and that Adaptus Mechanicus is one of the greats.
He's awesome.
Such a beautiful
I love
picture.
that.
So cool. And then we throw ourselves into more detail about Adaptus Titanicus. And again, I love the fact that features in these white dwarves were written by Jervis and others. I mean, of course, that went on for some time, and it's just wonderful to read these legends. And as we hear more and more interviews with them, to realize that they were having to sort of turn this stuff around really quickly and sort of make it up as they were going along, really, to sort of building these games. So they'd have all of these white dwarf articles everywhere, and then they'd have to bring them all together and do another edition. And there we go. We've got that wonderful artwork down there. So you'll be familiar with that spirit, having played it so recently, Josh. That's sort of the sense of the scale of the Titans. And there they are. There are those close combat option cards that you used.
That's it. Yep.
That's really cool, isn't it? So what you've got: attack, step back, defend, turn around, sidestep, disengage, all out attack. So this is quite an interesting section, because it's basically sort of readers' input. So it's readers talking about how to work with chaos. And it's a really nice idea to get gamers themselves involved in this way, and to look in more detail at an army, which in some ways I guess was quite unruly at the time in chaos. But and here we have some heavy metal picks, always a favourite. So Pete Taylor's someone who I wasn't really that familiar with, but it sounds like his thing was sort of making these incredible conversions. So he's really gone for it with these chaos beasts. I mean, they are pretty disgusting, but amazingly executed. And so well painted. The amount of work that must have gone into those, it's really, oh, there they go, frighteningly ugly creatures, as it says here. That kind of sums them up. But they're such an achievement, real sort of works of art. And then we've got some of the greats who we know, Mike McVeigh and Sid and Tony Cottrell and Phil Lewis on the other side. I really like some of the sort of slightly more understated ones, like those Space Marines. Those are some of the plastic Mark VI Marines. But that Space Wolf, that really captures the essence of Space Wolves to me. And I love the detail on the Blood Angel. And then there's some of our squats. Legion of the Damned, big fan of them as well. The fire detail on them is incredible. And then all of that chaos. Look at those colours. It's just really, really, really gorgeous, beautiful work. So here we've got some more heavy metal, and there we go. Look at those Titans, Josh. Aren't they fantastic?
Yeah, beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really glorious. That would highlight any table. And also, I love the fact they're clearly made for gaming, because they've got the discs within the base. So those did see some action, which is really satisfying. And then we've got some of the Eldar Phantom Titans on the other side as well, which I always sort of forget about Eldar in Epic, but they had some great stuff. So it's really nice to see that represented. The colouring and that scroll down in the bottom right is incredible. The way that green develops through yellow into red. That's really, really amazing painting.
Yeah, beautiful. And
then to finish, we've got one of these famous Mike McVeigh dioramas, where he does a sort of cut across of a battle scene. And so this is a squat stronghold under attack from those scurvy orcs. Mike McVeigh, he sort of only really worked on dioramas, didn't he, after a while?
Mm.
His painting is brilliant, but also his sense of imagination and sort of creating narrative is so clever. There's so many little stories going on. The Space Marine being shot down in the left-hand side, the orcs tunneling their way through just above him. But then the orcs being fought back down at the bottom. There's just so many levels to it and so much storytelling going on. It's lots of fun looking at this. And as an 11-year-old, I just spent hours and hours and hours poring over it. And it's been so nice getting back into the hobby now and seeing that there are so many people who love these miniatures and who love this style and this era. Because for a while I felt like it was just sort of, it was looked upon as being a bit crap, really. But in fact, it's a really amazing aesthetic, and it's nice that it's getting its recognition now. And I feel like my sort of 11-year-old self has been vindicated when I look at wonderful pictures like this. It was.
Well, George, it's been an absolute pleasure to go through this issue with you with 111. And
thank you, Josh.
Like I said before, I'm so happy that this was a beautiful scan of this book, and it's the best I've ever seen. So for anybody who's curious about getting these PDFs, I would strongly recommend that you go to Facebook to White Dwarf Through the Years, and you can go to their file section and access every White Dwarf since its inception from issue 1 all the way up to, I'd imagine, current day. So... But, mate, I'm just so happy that this was, I know it's not your first White Dwarf, but I know it's your favourite, and it was presented in such beautiful quality for you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. It's been great fun going through it again. There's so many happy memories, so thank you.
No, mate, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you again for your patronage and for your friendship, and I hope to talk to you again soon, maybe on the podcast at some point.
That'd be amazing. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, thanks again, mate. Take care.